So this is actually the sequel here. It is now 10 p.m. sharp. We're going to have a break 10 minutes from now, but let's now talk about figures with Christophe Tardy. Hello. Hello, Caroline, and hello, everyone. General Manager of the Français Benelux Morningstar. 2022 was quite a challenging year, so we experienced a context which we had not experienced in quite some time. Is this not the right opportunity to go to the various sustainable financial investment flows today? Well, the answer is yes. 2022 was quite a challenging year on the markets, and what can be seen here? Great. I was saying that today management companies or asset management companies better zero in on retail. This was to try to draw investors. And the idea behind this is as follows. Now, having ESG, sustainable funds, is that a good, attractive solution? The answer is quite simple, and we'll talk about figures, and I'm really entitled to slides because this is going to make things simpler with figures. Just a word, because Morningstar, well, what is Morningstar exactly? The Morningstar is the company that bought out Sustainalytics in July 2020, over 2 years ago. I fully agree with Philippe Sedbon insofar as the price inflation trend, but 6 to 7 years ago, we were not giving about half of the data. So we got climate data, we also got environmental data and corporate data, and all of those data did not exist in the past. Perhaps we should really have a look at a like-to-like basis now, like-for-like basis, I'm sorry. Now, we are an Anglo-American company, true, but for Sustainalytics, 73 people in the United States only of the 1,900 people and over half in the EU. So we're quite grounded in Europe and most especially in Amsterdam. So that's where we got quite a number of, or a whole variety of analysts. Mathilde Dufour was talking about it, as it's quite important to have a whole variety of people that understand information and analysis. I mean, all those, most of them are outside of the United States. This is something I wanted to mention. I thought it was important to answer this, this. Now, is just that an attractive factor? Perhaps let's get back to the definition. Let's get back to the definition of sustainable funds. And this will give you an idea as to the various data which data providers could produce. We're first going to be collecting the labels. Now, this, of course, is the point that might actually differentiate a sustainable fund from another non-sustainable fund. 1,200, 1,300 funds today. This is what it represents. Now, the data. Now, this is actually going through different authorities, or a different company. I'm sorry. And then you have disclosed data, disclosed by the management company. Now, those are the SFDR rankings and the impact fund and the exclusion fund. And the third layer, those are the data Morningstar is going to be calculating or analyzing. So we're going to be calculating the PAIs just to really have a global methodology over the funds, and we're going to be calculating based on Sustainalytics data and the inventory of the various portfolio, provide quite a number of different things here. And we also got a data analyst that have a look at the various text and really make sure that the company is highly committed to sustainable investments. And we got an indicator, sustainable, yes or no. So this is also another means we provide our users. And this really makes us possible to introduce the figures. But at the very inception, we're going to be using this ranking procedure, Article 8 and Article 9 ranking, which was somewhat, which drifted away from the basics here. Mathilde Dufour was saying that it really turned into a label, so to say. She's perfectly right. It's not at all a label, but it tends to be used as a label by the industrial sector. Quite simple label, but in terms of figures, what can be seen here? We deleted monetary funds because there are just a very few. We only have 120 under Article 8 and 2 and Article 9. But we tossed aside the monetary fund classifications. We got about 38% of those funds under Article 8 and 9, 33% for Article 9 and Article 8 in terms of numbers, and now the situation is different. Now we're surpassing the 50% of those funds sold in France. In other words, European funds under Article 8 or 9. So much for now the share of funds and the collection. Well, collection. Now this is also quite important too. Collection. Now in this case we got Article 8, Article 9, and Article 6, 2021. We really have a look at all the various funds were collected. Early 2022, we do have an important decrease or drop in collection, but second and third quarter 2022, only Article 9 funds or flows were collected. So we really see this Article 9 category is becoming quite attractive, and October figures really represent as a good reflection of what happened in the second quarter 2022. Article 9, the only ones being collected, and in November we get a return of collections here. Collections really come back in those three different types of funds. So this is quite important in terms of amounts of collected outstandings, but in terms of percentage points, it's even more significant because a few minutes ago we talked about Article 9 funds representing only 5% of the outstanding accounts, but here the increase, organic increase, is a lot more significant on Article 9 funds, and we realized that with the exception of 2 to 3 months, in the last 18 months we really witnessed an important collection, around 2% minimum, if not 3 to 4% of Article 9 funds. Obviously, investors are quite have great appetite for Article 9 and 8 funds. Now, despite the backpedaling in the second quarter, which you mentioned, well, I mean, especially with Article 8, but insofar as Article 9, not at all, even though those funds are more pricey, because this is what can be seen, too. If you could actually go on to the next slide. No, I'm sorry, this was actually the outstanding figures. Now, just the evolution of those outstanding figures. The last bar, now, for example, in the third quarter 2022, we see here, we realized that the outstanding accounts have really been evolving, and the most important component of Article 8 and Article 9 funds. Now we're still talking about off monetary funds. Now, when I was talking about costs here, now those are just representing one category. Those are Eurozone large cap category. This is a good illustration. I'm sorry, I need to really give further explanation. We got back to the indicator which I was referring to: sustainable fund, yes, or sustainable development, no. This indicator is provided by Morningstar teams. The first observation is there's an important gap here, 0.9% between active and passive funds, ETF. And we also have a large ESG associated with larger, more significant costs, or so-called disclosed ESG on ETFs or active funds. So obviously, if a management company having Article 8 funds and Article 9 funds represents a good way of attracting investors, and this allows us to collect. So asset management company got the message. Those companies got the message, given the number of funds created in the last few months. So what we can see here is 2020 and 2021 were important years in terms of fund creation. 523 funds in 2021. Now those are funds sold in France and issued in 2020. No, we're somewhat tampering with those because in 2020 there were no Article 8 funds, but we took on Article 8 funds or Article 9 funds on the 31st of December 2022. And on the contrary, in 2022 we had less created funds, but on the other hand, the proportion of Article 8 and Article 9 funds created in this year is a lot more significant because we're reaching 65% of funds issued, which are Article 8 and Article 9 funds. So this is a genuine appetite among investment management companies for the modification or creation of those funds, for them to become Article 8 or 9 funds, despite some headwind. And this is going to be attracting investors. So headwind, this is what we're going to be grappling with right now. What are the threats looming over sustainable investments? We can witness some threats, and perhaps more so in the United States. There's a political rejection in Florida, for example. The state of Florida withdrew $2 billion of outstanding from the BlackRock accounts or funds. Why? Because they did not agree with the ESG policy in that company. Vanguard, for example, in December, drifted away from that climate alliance initiative so as to avoid this political rejection. So it is starting to really produce a genuine impact in the United States for the time being. Knowing that all the states are not aligned to Florida. No. So, but I mean, this is already, we're talking about quite an important number of states. 8 states already have followed suit. And we also got to change in terms of priorities. We're talking about energy transition, for example, today. Energy safety, security, perhaps, is a factor which governments want to focus on. Greenwashing as well. So we're now drifting from a bad marketing practice with a reputation risks to a legal risk with EDWS, with a search warrant, searches, and greenwashing. There is a corporate risk of the asset management risk, but this is going to be creating confusing among investments. What is being said, is that true? That's what they're going to say. They're going to be scratching their heads. This could be a concern among those so-called ESG funds. We'll really need to really be careful insofar as transparency is concerned. Absolutely, Caroline, and a more important point as well. As Philippe Sedmont was saying a few minutes ago, asset management companies aim at growing investors' money. ESG on sub-performance in 2022, and this is the difference between two indexes. Morningstar Europe share, one is an ESG and the other one is a non-ESG equivalent, or the other way around. Non-ESG and ESG, and we realize here that in the year 2022, we got about 5% of sub-performance insofar as the ESG portion. This is quite significant, and we'll see this in... Okay, in the following slide, I got 3 different categories, representative categories. The European bonds, European mid-small cap shares, and Europe large cap shares. And in 2029, for example, categories delivered about the same performance levels regardless of the asset categories or ranks, with Article 6 funds being perhaps lesser, and Article 6 and large cap shares. Now the very differences here, 2021, an advantage here can be seen to Article 8 and Article 9 in 2022. On the contrary, we realize here that of all those 3 different categories, we got sub-performance, important sub-performance among Article 9 funds. And this is something which we need to be aware of, because investors are also going to be scrutinizing performance levels. And we need to surpass this, perhaps as short-term performance levels, and perhaps anticipate. Well, now, this is, of course, long-term investments are really being recommended here, but we understand all too well why investors behave in this and that, in such and such a way. Now, for example, D-ranking. Now, D-ranking, let me tell you that the headwind is not so much about D-ranking, but it's really about uncertain rules or regulations. We talked about it this morning. Regulations are uncertain, and perhaps the timing is not appropriate. Perhaps we should have had the information before setting up this whole process. And well, anyway, despite it all, we witnessed a very important thing in terms of number of funds. We only have 71 Article 9 funds in mid-76 that were deranked by, well, since October 2022. At the time, new FTSs were disclosed with more important expectations on Article 9 funds, but we're still expecting 120 classified outstanding funds in Europe, with the main asset management companies. And we also got a study, a Morningstar study that was issued or done actually in the last quarter 2022. And we believe that along with the new Article 9 expectations, we believe that there will only be 5% of funds, only 5% of those funds, of Article 9 funds that could actually remain. So this is really something that could have a great impact on de-ranking or declassification unless regulations change. But if we really consider regulations as they are, this should happen. Are we still going to have Article 9 funds? Well, I was saying, well, perhaps there might not be any at some point in time. Now, this is a risk. And very last point, and the lack of standardization among ESG information, key information. Now, this again is something which is quite important, the lack of clarity. Guillaume David was referring to MiFID. I had an experience with a Belgian bank that they told me that they had set up the MiFID questionnaire to evaluate the ESG profile. They were surprised at the results because nobody wanted to invest in ESG. Actually, they heard that advisors, if you say that you want ESGs, I won't be able to sell anything. So I'm not sure that this is the purpose of the regulation, but anyway, this is a problem. But it is quite important to really mention this, not to make a long story short. The good news is that the hedging is larger and larger. Well, in terms of information, we collect a lot of information via EOT, European ESG template, from the part of asset management companies. So the coverage is going up, and extremely large coverage in terms of Article 9 and Article 8, 83%. However, if we get our hands back on information, the interpretation given by asset management companies could differ. And I wanted to use an example here on the next slide. In other words, the disclosure, the October disclosure from the different companies that are following the analytical index, and they for EBS 80%. They disclose 80% sustainable investment minimum. So EDF same index, whereas iShares or HSBC are going to be disclosing to 20%. So this was in October. Now, a good thing is, well, in alignment with what I saw in December. EBS is now at 20%, and on the contrary, iShares went up to 25%. So we really got an alignment around those ETFs or passive funds, duplicating an identical index. And here again, good news, and perhaps they tend to really have a better understanding of regulations with a greater harmonization today, and that's a good news. Very last word in conclusion. I kind of overshot. I'm sorry. So anyway, despite it all, in terms of conclusion, ESG remains attractive. At Morningstar, we also study the various factors having sway over the attractiveness of a fund. It depends on the rankings. I jotted down the various data points here insofar as Europe share and ESG really justifies the fund collection, representing about 12% of that collection. On the contrary, we're referring to performance levels, which we can see here with the one-star rating. This is going to have a negative impact on the fund collection process. ESG remains attractive. It's good for the management company. It's good for the planet. It's good for the company from a large sense of the word, the larger definition of the word. We need to really press ahead in that direction. Thank you very much, Christophe Tardy. Thank you, General Manager.
As sustainable investing becomes mainstream, There is now greater demand from investors for more clarity on the environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, aspects of their investments, as well as increased regulatory pressure for standard ESG reporting. Morningstar has listened to investors and carefully considered the industry's ESG investing needs. We've made significant investments to develop our data, research, ratings, and customized reporting solutions, so you can create best-in-class communications that distill the complexities of ESG into clean and clear visuals. Investors can quickly assess whether an investment or portfolio holdings are exposed to material ESG factors, controversial areas, or impacts to a cause, to build stronger portfolios for long-term growth. Morningstar is founded on empowering investor success.
Discover cases.